I'm the Regional Director of LATOKEN. I'm based here in Singapore. I welcome you today to yet another episode of VCTV, which is the Venture Capital TV from LATOKEN. I'm very excited to have you guys again today. And the discussion is going to be around investments. What has changed since March 2020 this year, and how are things shaping up in terms of investments in which industries? So thanks for joining me today. I know most of you. I'd like to start with the speakers by a short introduction about yourself, like what are you, which company do you represent, what are you doing right now in the space? Then I can take the questions after that. I'd like to ask Henry first to start with a short introduction.
Hi, Sony. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Henry An here. So a very quick intro. I have two hats. I have my own firm at HHN Capital, in which I do advisory work, mostly on the CFO end with startups and small, medium-sized businesses. And the second hat that I wear, I'm a venture partner for a venture fund, looking at a lot of early stage companies. I spent a fair amount of time in fintech, blockchain, consumer, AI, ML, and IoT. Just throw a little something interesting in the summertime. I like to play sports. Now it's I still play, but due to COVID, things are limited. But enjoying the summer a little bit hot here in New York. Thank you for having me, Sony.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Thank you, Peter. How are you?
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Nice to have you back on our show.
So. Yes, please. So I'm the executive director of Weimer Family Office. We are a family office based in London and Denmark. We focus on real estate, metals and mining, alternative energy, and other investments. Our minimum size is about 150 million to well over $1 billion. Since COVID in March, I've put approximately $3.5 billion to work across various real estate and hospitality opportunities. I also have a joint venture with the Fortress Credit Funds, where I'm looking for companies that are pretty much liquidity starved, that are looking for liquidity, but otherwise would be solvent, and trying to find those that would benefit from maybe a 25-year triple net lease, where we could buy the real estate underlyingly and then provide them with a lease on that opportunity, so that helps them through this crisis.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Welcome again. Next, I would like to go with Justin.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, morning.
Or good evening, I guess, where you are. Yeah, so Justin Clapper, I'm with Charge Ventures. We're an early stage fund in New York City. So we like to be the first check-in when we can, and we're always looking for kind of interesting folks. We're generalists, but there's a little bit more kind of method of the madness, where our fund was founded by 2 data scientists. So we're looking for places where kind of big data can drive the wedge, and is kind of, I guess, the succinct way of putting it is just kind of reorganizing change and informing the future. And the verticals that's showing up. And me personally, I'm a former Navy guy who's spent about 10 years in the U.S. Navy and got out and passed through banking, startup, and now investing with Charge.
Great.
So nice
Thank you. Welcome again. Thank you, Justin. Last but not least, Gary.
Yes. Well, good to see everybody today. I feel like I have a little family here. You know, I see everybody, so I love it. Anyhow, my name is Gary Fowler, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been doing startups for 35 years. My largest exit was a $1.35 billion company that I was on the executive management team of, that I brought from Israel to the US, Click Software, which went to Salesforce. I've done 15 companies, primarily in the area of artificial intelligence. My last company that I co-founded 4 years ago is Eva.ai. Eva is about a $700 million company that is working on remote workforce management. And this is pre-COVID. And David Yang, it's a billionaire from Russia, is my partner in Eva. I've also been a venture capitalist. I've started a seed fund. working on $100 million fund now. And we have our money pooled where we do some investments together, several friends of mine, high net worth individuals. Anyhow, that's what I do. And I'm passionate. We have GSD. So GSD is my a company, my venture studio. It's Get Shit Done Venture Studio. And we got that from Mark Zuckerberg because the back of his desk says "Get Shit Done." It's like, why not name your company that, right? And so we take growth stage AI companies global. We look like for companies that really dominate their sector in artificial intelligence, and those are the companies that we curate to take them to the next level. So we've done it. You know, like I said, I've done my first company at 21, and here we are. With GSD. So great to be here. It's good seeing everybody's face again, and look forward to this conversation today. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Welcome to the VCTV family. As I said, we're all family now. Thank you, Gary. Okay. So basically since March, April, May, June, July, I would like to know what has changed when we first got hit by the virus. It was a shock. And since then, what's new in the investment process? Maybe talk about like in phases, like first month, second month, and 3 months time, what happened? So Henry, would you like to take this question first? Like, what's the current situation like compared to March this year?
Sure. So I think when March happened, you initially, prior to March, you have a shutdown of the economy in China first. Then fast forward to March, then you have two continents, primarily in the US and Europe, had a shutdown. I think it was a truck running to a deer for most of us. I mentioned this to you before in prior chats that we have never seen anything like this. So I think people were shocked initially, panic set in, that's in financial markets. Well, global economy first, global financial markets, global oil markets, and then it spread it to everything else, because those three things basically cover most of this stuff anyway. And then you got a global health crisis. I think, let's say just on a high level, I think global VC deals are down probably roughly, in the grand scheme of things, roughly 20-30%, maybe even more, depends on which data you have. I think valuation have softened up a little bit. In general, you have best companies still commanding extreme valuation. I think I've seen a little bit of uptick of activities recently, but certainly it's not as robust as prior to COVID. I'll just leave it at that at the moment.
Okay. Great insights there, Henry. Thanks for that. Peter, same question, please.
Sorry about that. I had to get the mute off. So let's just talk about where we were prior to COVID and where we are today. And as you mentioned, each of the months. So again, as Henry mentioned, nobody was expecting anything like this. The situation we're looking at is very different than the 2008-2009 financial crisis. And the best comparison is going back to the Great Depression. I've written a number of articles on this, calling it the super economic and social depression, because there is a large social aspect to it. Whereas the 2008-2009 crisis was focused on housing and the banking system, this has a real impact on the real economy, all aspects of aggregate demand. And I think on Thursday, tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Bureau of Economic Statistics will be releasing US GDP growth. Whether the US GDP growth for the second quarter is down 20% or down 50% really doesn't matter. The entire economy was shut down from mid-March through mid-June until things started opening up again. So all areas of aggregate demand collapsed: consumption, residential investment, corporate investment, etc. Now, because of the unprecedented response in a much timelier fashion than we saw in 2008-09 by global monetary authorities as well as fiscal authorities, we've seen a massive prop up in the equity and debt markets, to the point that the Fed is actually buying high yield bonds, not just investment grade bonds, to grease the system. So we have an incredible amount of liquidity sloshing around the globe. On top of that, the Federal Reserve buying high grade and investment grade bonds. What does all that mean? We have an asset bubble in equity markets. We have an asset bubble in investment grade and high yield debt. And I think once we see whether or not third quarter GDP will likely be up, but if during the third quarter, towards the end of the third quarter here, we see renewed lockdowns across major cities in the US, we're already starting to see that in Melbourne and Australia. We saw it in South Korea, parts of China. Spain will close down. If we see a renewed lockdown in the global economy, fourth quarter GDP will collapse as well. And then when you look at price to earnings ratios, I'm a numbers guy, the prices won't justify the falling earnings estimates and future estimates, which means there'll have to be a significant collapse in stock prices, and particularly the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Googles of the world. On top of that, the higher debt prices that we're seeing. So there is complete disconnection between equity and debt markets right now and the real economy. And at some point, the chicken will have to come home to roost. And I expect you would start to see that towards the end of the third quarter, if not in the fourth quarter. I also believe, though, that the monetary authorities will continue their purchasing of investment grade debt and high yield debt to grease the system. We'll probably see another fiscal package once the Senate and House come forward to help grease the wheels, except you're going to have 35, 40 million people unemployed in the US, and those numbers are not going to go down anytime soon. We're not going to have a V-shaped recovery. We might have an L-shaped recovery or a Nike swish type of recovery. So with all of that, where we're investing is we're looking for good operators, whether those real estate operators or management teams that have the liquidity to survive over the next, call it 12 to 18 months, that have the ability to execute on their business plans, and we'll be putting forward our capital to support that.
Great points there. Thank you, Peter. Next, I'd like to talk to Gary. Any good news which might just...
No, there's a lot of good news. So I work in artificial intelligence. My company, Eva, our inbound interest since the time of pre-COVID is up 38 times right now. So it's actually unprecedented. And just look, I mean, here we are on Zoom, and I talk about this a lot, but I remember meeting with the venture capitalists behind Zoom 5 years ago. And they said, hey, you got to try this really cool thing. I was one of the original Zoom users, right? So 5 years, almost 6 years ago. And here we are. They went from 30 million daily users to 300 million. So I just wrote an article in Medium 2 days ago on the accelerated digital transformation. I'll share it. But we are in an unprecedented time. We still have enormous amounts of data. Every person here that's on this call has somewhere around 300,000 items within their personal cloud. The entire web in 1996 was 257,000 websites. That number doubles every year. We are in a state of infobesity. There's so much data around us. Companies that can take that data and synthesize it, companies that can help us develop better personal experiences online, like Zoom, like holographic images, and have a closer experience are going to be great. Think about the efficiencies that have happened in the last 6 months. It's unprecedented in terms of the way we do business. We've been forced to do what would happen in 10 years in a span of 6 months.
Absolutely.
We are doing business online. The companies that actually, and I'll actually share this in the chat right this second, but the companies that are online that have embraced digital transformation are going to be winners. It's the ones that don't, that understand that there's, we need to talk, we need to have lunch, we need to do this, they're going to be losers. We are in a stage of digital transformation. And by the way, what's unprecedented about this is it's a global digital transformation. We're now being more easily connecting from the US to Singapore to China to Russia. I mean, I can't every day. And so take advantage of the opportunities. Look at it. And I know Peter was down on some of the stocks, but think about what's happened with Amazon in the last 6 months. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been buying a lot of stuff on Amazon, right? I actually like it. So Netflix, I don't know, about you, but I've watched more movies, right?
Yes, for sure. I'm the addict.
It's, and so look at the entertainment. Look at how our lives have changed. Look at one thing, bicycles. There are no stocks of bicycles. It's hard to buy a bike. People have gone back to some traditional family values to spend time together. That's not a bad thing. So what's happened is we've had to be much more efficient. We've changed our lives to be, it's like, I was telling my wife, it's like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I see people on bikes all the time riding. I never saw them before like today. So what happens is we need to embrace this digital change, this digital transformation. It's here. 92% of the companies, by a McKinsey study, 6 months ago, we're talking about doing digital transformation. Think about, on my side, Eva, remote workforce management. How many companies need to manage their remote workforces today? Like almost all of them, right? If they're not brick and mortar. So let's embrace the change. Let's move forward. Think about how much better. What did they say in India? It's the first time they've seen the Himalaya mountains because there wasn't pollution. I mean, there are some good things that have come out of that. So embrace it. The companies that are dealing with the digital transformation are companies that are going to have dramatic success. And I believe that success is going to continue.
Love it. Thank you so much, Gary. Embrace the change. Thank you so much. Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that it's just, a consequence of, the world, I guess I would say that the changes that are happening kind of accelerated what was there before. And so, what we're seeing, the future came faster. It's more unevenly distributed than before. To Peter's point about the, pick your logo shaped recovery, right? Whether it's a Nike or a whatever letter towards the end of the alphabet, but for as many people who, if they're knowledge workers and they can work from home and they can enjoy some of the, digital economy things, there's lots of people who can't. And in places where, especially we're seeing this in the United States where, we don't have a good handle on the spread of COVID, and there's still community spread. We're seeing a lot of people who are essential workers and they're frontline workers, and schools starting soon, and so that's like kind of a significant issue. And so as hopeful, it's like kind of this balance between there's certain things that don't manual trades. There's certain things that just you can't take digital because they require there's a manual component to them. And that's not to say that it's hopeless. It's the things for the past couple months just haven't been, the advances haven't been evenly distributed. And it's been and at times horrifying to watch, in certain ways to see kind of that play out in real time. But I think it's also, I'm personally hopeful because we've also seen a wake up call, and because that much compression, that time compression, I think has really highlighted some of the inequities that people face day to day. And because you can't avoid it when it's right in your face. So it's certainly not a settled matter, but I am hopeful because these technologies and pipelines, the kind of the unbundling of services has the, at Charge, we're looking at how kind of content industrialization and, kind of the broader passion economy can kind of open up as people essentially get not automated out of their jobs, but as kind of their time is more free. It's like we like to think about it. How can they still live fulfilled and rich lives? And so we see a lot of opportunity there, but there are some steps that need to be supported along the way, and whether that's like universal basic income or some other things. It's interesting to kind of see it happen like in 3 months. That was not the case that we kind of saw happening. So
I think it's quite unprecedented, as everybody is saying, and it's a wake-up call for sure. Thank you, Justin. I've got a very interesting question outside of US. Okay, which sectors are most affected economically by the coronavirus in the developing countries? Let's talk about the
Yeah,
developing
I can. I just got off the phone. I have an office in Moscow in Russia, and one of my portfolio companies is there, and it's a battery company. And the supply chain has dramatically slowed down in terms of for production to be able to get the materials to be able to make the batteries. So that has slowed down. The supply chain has been affected a bit. So it's not destroyed, but it's slowed down quite a bit.
So if I could add in, just sitting here in Europe, the U.S. is the biggest recipient of tourism dollars, about 200 billion. But when you look at that as a percentage of GDP, it's relatively insignificant. Whereas Spain and Italy, 15% of GDP comes from tourism dollars. Those economies have been decimated since March by COVID. And if we have renewed lockdowns, which we likely will in those two countries, the economies will be decimated for quite some time. So clearly, the hospitality industry, tourism in general, have been decimated and unlikely to recover anytime soon. However, that being said, some of my allocation of funds is going into the hospitality industry. I'm looking for companies when, Gary says embrace change. I'm looking for hotel companies that are embracing change. If you look at the baby boomers, they're relatively insignificant now relative to the growth of the millennials that have overtaken the baby boomers, and that's the future. The baby boomers are looking for ESG compliant companies, governance, social, climate change, etc. They're looking for green spaces, organically grown food. And if anything, coming out of this COVID, we're going to see new technology being implemented for social distancing, whether that's F&B in terms of using your mobile phone to order in food to your rooms, whether it's a check-in without checking in with a handsome boy or girl behind the counter. You're going to be checking in through your mobile phone from the airport or your car on the way there. So there will be, basically faceless checking in going forward. The cost of those technology upgrades will be significant per room. So therefore, the larger hotel companies around the world will be the ones that have the liquidity to survive, and will also be the ones that are consolidating the smaller, medium-sized companies that can't go in. So what we're investing in the hospitality industries is companies like Six Senses, which already have wellness and well-being as part of their mantra. They already have social distancing because of the high cost to go to those specific spaces and hotels. So I think those type of hotels will continue to benefit from the social distancing, the post-COVID world. Also, the larger hotel companies and tourism companies that have the liquidity to be the consolidators in this post-corona world. So again, it also goes back to my initial comments where in terms of embracing change, I've deployed $3.5 billion in terms of dollars in terms of engagements and term sheets since late March. They're going to those companies that we think are sustainable environmentally, have implemented the technology to move forward, and the ones that have the wherewithal and the management teams to go through a cycle that we're seeing.
Thanks, Peter. You've actually answered my next question about emerging products after the pivot, after the pandemic. But anyways, thank you. Thank you for those insights. Henry, what are your thoughts?
Sure. There are quite a few were mentioned already, so I'll mention two since it was on the topic of discussion as well. Physical retail was hit pretty hard, obviously because mandated global shutdowns, and people were concerned of not being able to keep social distancing with retails. And also that's non-essential. And then people are concerned that if their other customers are touching various goods, if you touch it or try it on, you might be contaminated, or that might be contaminated, you might get potential infections. So that led to a beneficiary. You mentioned Amazon, right? Amazon stock or business is going to the roof. Another one, you also, I saw an article yesterday of AMC, which is a theater chain, movie theater chain in the States, because of, a mandated global shutdown, people are concerned you cannot keep social distancing. Traditionally, people would just pack into a movie theater, and then you cannot see a new movies until you go to the theaters. Now, you talked about you've been, Netflix subscribers went to the roof. Sony, you also mentioned other than Amazon, you've been, subscribing or watching a lot of movies. Now, I think the model might be broken potentially in the traditional movie business, because how it goes is you go from the movie makers that funds it to the theater first. Look at that chain or supply chain. After that, because you cannot access it online first, right? People want to see it when it comes out. So after the period is over at a theater, then it go to global platform distribution, digital distributions. So because of COVID, some of the sort of media companies have actually potentially just cut out AMC or movie theaters, just go straight to the global platform distributions. I'll just mention those two since you mentioned Amazon and Netflix. Thank you.
Yeah, Henry, very good point. I'm just curious and intrigued. Do you think the future of the movie industries and the movie theaters is going to disappear?
I think that's a tough one. I'll tell you why. I think from a purely business standpoint, the traditional theater, it's just outdated. Why can I access a movie when I can stream it from my home, right? That's from a purely business standpoint. But there's also what I call a social standpoint. People like to be with other people, right? Why do we like to have family gatherings? Why do we have friends gatherings? Why do we have barbecues? Why do we like to go to a mall?
Absolutely.
Can we buy things online? Of course we can. But there's always a human interaction element to it. I just don't know whether it's going to go away or not in terms of movie theaters. But what I can tell you is the model is definitely broken. It just, once again, if you look at the industry, a lot of industries in general, they can be disrupted in a heartbeat. But the thing is, we human beings don't like to change unless we're forced to change. Right? Gary talked about the digital transformation strength from 6 months to 10 years. I can agree with him. I'll give you another example. So the CEO of Morgan Stanley, James Gorman, mentioned, if 6 months ago you told him that he will put 90% or in excess 90% of his workforce working from remote, you must be joking. He will never do that, because guess what? If it fails, he will be on a chopping block. But due to COVID, he had no choice. So if it failed, guess what? Everyone's doing it anyway. So we're forced to do that. When he is forced to do that, or other global firms, you know what? The actual productivity was pretty darn good, right? So, now, the business model might be changing for people who are working from home, or global real estate might be changed, at least on the commercial side. So, I think, in short, to answer your question, I think it's hard to say. Purely business standpoint, yes, it can be definitely disrupted. From a social component standpoint, I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, Henry, while you were talking, I think Peter has a question for you on the same point.
Actually, I just wanted to echo Henry's thoughts about the needs for we're social animals for the most part. I like going to a movie theater so I could eat greasy popcorn, hot dogs, and nachos, which my wife would kill me if I brought that in bed on our big screen TV to watch with a Netflix movie. So there's definitely a benefit of being able to eat candy and nachos and hot dogs and greasy popcorn, which I would not be allowed to bring home. But more importantly, I think it's important, Henry, to also note in terms of the disruption, Netflix, Showtime, HBO, Amazon Prime, there is clearly a disruption going on due to the benefit of technology to the movie theaters well before COVID came about. This has been going on for over a decade. And as a distressed focused investor in many cases, we've seen movie theaters and the companies behind them and studios going out of business, on the verge of bankruptcy, being bought by foreign companies, consolidation, all this to try to assimilate, to try to figure out a way forward. So if anything, COVID, like we've seen with the hospitality industry, and again with the movie theaters, retail in general, is just causing an acceleration of a trend that was already in place pre-COVID.
Yeah, after you guys mentioned about that, I remember Blockbuster. I used to buy, DVDs. No more. That's way before COVID. Thank you, Peter, for adding those points. Justin.
Yeah, no, I'm with Peter on the greasy food. I just think that and the experience and Henry on just like kind of but I thought the CEO of AMC, because people have clung so, and people, people who are incentivized, companies that are incentivized by this distribution model of, the first three in the prime window of distribution in the traditional, kind of rollout model, have clung so tightly. And there was the AMC Universal standoff earlier in the summer where Universal had pushed and said, hey, we're just going to start streaming now. And AMC said, hey, you'll never distribute through us again. So there's a standoff. And yesterday, everybody was saying, hey, what happened? And the AMC CEO had this great quote where he said, listen, restaurants, it's a tough business, but everybody's got a kitchen in their house, right? So everybody can cook at home, but people still go out to eat, which I think echoes a lot of what people are saying here. There's something about going out and having the experience. Does it mean that every movie theater is going to survive? Probably not, right? But some of them will. And change is part of life. And I think that's true here. And it was true before COVID. It'll be true after COVID. And so you'll see some consolidation, and there's always opportunity there. But just means that there's still going to be opportunities for popcorn and movies and seeing people and, seeing things in theaters too. So I just thought that was a great quote that really, kind of drove home the point that, there's an experience differentiator between, their digital distribution has come a long way since, Blockbuster, but, there's something about seeing it on a big screen that you just can't replicate it in a house, even with like VR and some of these new technologies, seeing it with your friends, seeing it in a group when that's safe again. That's something that you can't do that. So going to like a first three weekend and then a rev share on the back end, which I think is what AMC got out of that deal, seems like a win-win. But I just thought that was a great quote.
Yeah, absolutely. It was indeed, Justin. Thank you so much. I think Peter also has a question for Gary. Go on, Peter.
Gary, you mentioned something about the supply chain, and obviously there's been a huge disruption in the supply chain for so many different industries. I was just curious because technology is not my background. How are you seeing opportunities in the supply chain using technology to help in this post-COVID world?
Well, so so from the point of manufacturing, being able to have less hands-on, so it's really driven some of the areas of like semi-supervised and unsupervised artificial intelligence, robotics in particular. So that's really picked up. In terms of some of the challenges with so throughout the supply chain, being able to access the workforce to be able to see who's got the fevers, thermal detection, thermal detection, to see who's coming on the ships, testing, all those kind of things to prevent. The other thing is optimization to figure out, do I have the right ship at the right place at the right time with the right products, making sure that, we're using the right times of ordering of the product. Again, from, in terms of, I can just tell you about the battery because I'm the president of the company. And, I can't get components from China, right, in a timely fashion right now. They're just delayed because of they've been shut down, et cetera. So I think, in terms of, so what we're doing better today, I had a call with the investor on that battery company. It's just amusing. One is we're having more communications on Zoom to be able to solve the issues faster. Then at the situation with the supply chain, we're trying to do everything we can to cut out the inefficiencies in the system to get it to us quicker. So for instance, Samina is building our batteries that we're doing in Finland. I've now changed the battery location to the US and used the US location. We just, some adjustments. Before it was like, if the labor costs are a little bit higher, I'm okay with it to get it faster. Right. And the thing is right now, there's I'm the chairman of a company called IREX.ai, and that's a security company that we pivoted to COVID-19 response. So being able to figure out who has what. So we have these thermal cameras that are able to detect if somebody's coming in a retail, just like a Rite Aid or a Walmart, to be able to detect if somebody's got a temperature coming into the store and flag them before they come in. we're trying to, so prevention's a big deal, and using those kind of technologies to reduce the chance of infection is really high.
Right.
Contact tracing is another thing, to be able to figure out who's got it before they, a lot of the problem is because the workforce getting sick, right? They're closing the facilities down because the workforce getting sick. So what we need to do is use the technologies to be able to stop that.
Yeah.
And the good news is it's happening. So look at telemedicine today, right? The telemedicine opportunity has dramatically increased because of this whole COVID situation. In a point, I just want to say one thing. I don't know about you, but we actually have started reopening drive-in theaters here in Florida.
Wow, that's good.
Seriously. We actually have community drive-in theaters, and it's like the blended model. It's like going back in time. It's like when I was a kid and my parents took me to drive it, but it's actually a big thing down here now. So they pivoted a little bit. I love it, actually. I think it's the coolest thing. So
yes, I want to add just one point, right? So that just go back to the point about the theater. I don't want to just keep driving to the point. That's the social component to it that it's hard to answer. Business model, it's definitely broken in the traditional sort of movie theater chain.
Mhm.
Why do people do that in terms of driving through? It's simple, because now you can just stay in your car. You keep social distancing. So you don't get, you don't get COVID, hopefully, with the people in the car. And then the second thing is you have a social component to it. I can watch a damn movie at home. Why do I have to drive through it to see it, right? So, it's seeing on a big screen with a lot of people around it, that makes it human, right? A human social interaction type of stuff, even though that you can't really touch or see really be very close to other people other than car next to each other. But the social component to it, it's going to keep certain things intact, because at the end of the day, we are social animals. So.
Talking about theaters, I just saw an article or a picture of a floating boats and an open air theater somewhere. I was like, I thought it was very cool. Okay, thank you guys. Okay, talking about pivot, because Carrie mentioned about pivoting, like, successful pivot cases. I would like to hear from Justin, maybe. What are the successful pivots that you've seen ever since, the pandemic started?
Yeah. Well, I think that, so supply chains have been, to Gary's point, been first. I think they were frustrated, and then they were stopped. If they were already under quite a bit of stress due to there were some trade issues that people are familiar with, possibly in the last couple of years, that we're like slowly working through, to put it mildly, and so they were already being frustrated, and then I think they got more frustrated towards the end of the year with things going on, and then things got stopped, and then as demand, as Peter kind of talked about, demand kind of nosedived as people kind of stopped going out, stopped buying things, and then it picked back up as online spend kind of went back up. And so I think where you've seen the big pivots are people moving into, we've seen the emergence of people moving to kind of like the new QVC, right? Like kind of new, this isn't new for our friends out in East Asia, or people who are familiar with, right? People who are familiar with some of the things that have been very familiar in China for a long time, but purchasing, right, kind of in picture purchasing, which is newer in the West, but just purchasing right in app, that's something that wasn't as big in the West, and a little bit kind of Facebook, Instagram, kind of in-app purchasing, and that's become, or in kind of in medium purchasing, and that's something that we've seen as folks have moved from retail, which that was easy and people were used to that, and all of a sudden with COVID, that was less attractive for a couple different reasons. And so we've seen that was the big pivot, is can you pivot if you're a consumer? If you're a consumer, can you pivot D2C, either in-app, in-picture purchase through these distribution mechanisms? And some of these channels have opened up that were not as popular or prevalent in the West, similar to Ali and some of these other kind of channels that have been popularized in China. And some of these other channels that have been around for a while. And then the other ones that have opened up are like the digital distribution channels that we talked about earlier. So new forms of entertainment, first run movies, and streaming, games, and kind of streaming experiences that people have been a part of that maybe they weren't going to ever do before, because everybody's kind of locked down together. Like, I don't know if people are tracking Fortnite. If you knew what that was before COVID, you probably have heard of it now. And less is a game and more of an experience, or a place where you go to maybe listen to Travis Scott. And so this is like, so these are the pivots we're kind of seeing, right? Kind of the movement to online because of that acceleration forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Justin. Peter, I would like to take the same question. What are the successful pivots that you've seen recently?
So from my experience, again, you need to look at where my expertise is, and that's in these days really focused on the real estate industry in particular. So the big pivot that we're seeing there is a shying away from, forget about retail and hospitality. The office environment has changed. A survey was recently done, I'm not sure by who, but many employees don't want to go back to their offices for the remainder of this year, even if things start to pick up in September. We're already seeing colleges, universities, private schools, and others already looking at a continuation of virtual learning, with maybe some mixing it up with coming in to see teachers and stuff. So huge pivot away from this social interaction towards more of the Zoom, Microsoft Teams type of environment. I think that's going to continue. So the office space is going to be under significant pressure in the short term, maybe possibly in the medium term, to basically figure out how to cope with the new social distancing measures that will eventually go away from social distancing to more of what is the new norm, particularly the norm for millennials, and in terms of what they require in their office environment. So that's on the office space. In many cases, what I'm seeing in real estate is a pivot away from flats in terms of owning apartments, owning flats, to the rental market. It might be more difficult to get a loan in the post-COVID world, particularly if loan losses rise among the banks. So instead of buying, more people will start to rent. And if more people are starting to rent and they have problems in terms of they lose their job, they can negotiate with the landlord for 30 or 60 days, but then they get kicked out. But that's okay. They'll have another tenant that'll come right back in. So you're not going to see these massive foreclosures that we saw in 2008, 09, banks stuck with homes and stuff. There's going to be a pivot to real estate that makes sense for the new lifestyle that people are looking for. In terms of real retail, as a distressed investor, I'm looking at retail as a huge opportunity as the high street locations go, as Gary continues to buy more and more on Amazon, like myself and others. That's fine. There's no need for all these high street locations, nor supermarkets, etc. So what the pivot there is going to be towards maybe a residential building or a multi-use building that's a combination of co-work, co-living in the post-COVID world, and something that fits in terms of everybody's lifestyle, in terms of humanity, for the medium or longer term. So that's the pivots I'm seeing. And also it has a huge direct investment opportunity for me in terms of where I'm putting my investment dollars.
Very good points. I have a question regarding real estate rentals as opposed to owning. I mean, if that really if that really sets in, it's going to be a big blow to the real estate market, because there are a lot of people, realtors, what are they called? I mean, I think they rely on that income.
Let's first of all, I think there's several questions there. First, number one, in Europe, in the UK in particular, people from birth are basically savings to get on the property ladder, because the property ladder has led to a significant amount of wealth. And like anywhere, the US, Europe, the UK, your primary residence is basically your nest egg. But looking at it from an investment point of view, is it a great investment? You've got mortgage costs, you got costs in terms of maintenance and stuff, adding all that in, interest upon interest, did you really, is it really the best investment, or are there other investments? So really, you need to look at it from a longer term perspective. But in terms of my comments, and from an investor looking in, I like the rental market a lot better, the rent to own market better, just for the reasons I just mentioned. And if you want to look at anecdotal evidence, just look at some of the major cities. New York, housing prices are falling in the actual city. Not as much so as in the suburbs, but I'm not seeing a massive trend out of the city into the suburbs. San Francisco, same situation, less sales, more time on the market. Buyers have more power than sellers right now. And that's going to be stay in place at least for the next 12 to 18 months, if not longer. But the rental market is holding up extremely well and likely will continue to do so. So again, I'm looking at it from an investor point of view, where I feel like my dollars are more safe and where are the trends. I also believe, I've been a number of calls on this. I'm the vice chairman of the GRI Club, which is a large real estate club here in Europe. The trend towards that you're reading about the huge migration. Nobody wants to be in a city anymore and moving to the suburbs. That doesn't work. Just as Henry mentioned, people want to be social. They want to be social animals. The city is not going away. The urban environment's not going to go away. Over time, once the pandemic, we've been through pandemics in the course of history, is a thing of the memory. People will gravitate back to the big cities, but just not right for now.
Great points. Peter, anybody wants to add on the real estate bit, or any pivot, other success pivot cases?
The interesting and new housing starts are up in the U.S. And one of the reasons is people moving out of the cities, right, to other locations, places like from California to Nevada. So it's interesting, even with the pandemic, that the housing starts are up, new housing starts.
Right.
I want to add just one point, echo Peter's point. I thought about this a lot. I said, it's New York City or some of the bigger cities going away in terms of residents or just people being in the city. My conclusion is, the short answer is no. The reason is, if you look at, if history is any type of guidance of what's going to happen in the future, Tokyo was destroyed as a result of World War II. I think 90 or over 95% of the city was destroyed. 80 years fast forward, Tokyo is well and alive. If you look at downtown, New York City was destroyed in 2001 with Al-Qaeda bombing the Twin Towers. Some people thought that they're going away. It's not going to come back anytime soon. Fast forward 19 years or 20 years, downtown New York City, it's well and alive and thriving. So yes, I think in the short and medium term, people are flocking away from the cities, but in general, because as long as human beings will have a social component to it, it's going to come back well and alive. Would it look the same 10, 5, 20 years later? I don't know. There might be changes on the horizon, but people will flock back to the cities eventually.
Yeah.
Great points. Justin, you raised your, yeah.
Well, you can't argue with history, right? I mean, those are certainly really cogent points. The only thing I would say that's different is that we're doing this on Zoom, and the technology is really kind of pushed forward. And so, I don't think that I'm very bullish on New York City. I'm a big fan, obviously, and people will always want to be there. And I just think that cities will become more distributed, and I think that's what you're just starting to see. So to Gary's point about new housing starts, you're just starting to see people as technology's allowed cities to unbundle a bit. I think that's what we're starting to see. So as companies have, you don't have to do the lunches in person. You don't have to do the face-to-faces. There's some parts of businesses that will always have to be, certain industries will always have to have an in-person component. Certain companies will always have to meet, whether it's quarterly calls, dinners, conferences. There always have to be some face-to-face, but certain companies have figured out that that's not true all the time, much to the airline industry's chagrin, right? But certain things don't have to be done in person. And so I think that that's what we're starting to see. And how much of that is permanent is anyone's guess, but the technology has come far enough, fast enough that I think that some of that's going to be really sticky, especially after, I mean, who knows, but probably almost a year until we get back to where it's relatively, you know, widely accepted to just be moving around and not be worrying about it again. So I think it's interesting. I mean, it's hard to argue with people wanting to go back and to the way it was, but it's also hard, I think, to argue with, you know, lower cost of living. Somebody who lives outside New York City, like lower cost of living, and just a little more space. If you can just hop on your computer and fire it up and be, you know, essentially in the office from anywhere.
Very good insights. I have to add something to it because I'm a city person as well. I lived in London City before moving to Singapore. I think for me, going away to a countryside was just during the weekends, just to have a break. But yeah, city life is not going to go away for sure. I mean, you know, Henry, 20 years down the lane, let's talk about this. Let's see what happens. I don't know, 20 years. Good.
I have something to say. So we have another challenge happening right now. In the last 100 years, the population of the world has gone up 4 times. So we are going to be driven to more effective and efficient housing. And we're going to be driven to sustainable. So as the population keeps increasing, we have 7.8 billion people today on the planet. 4 times it went up in 100 years. So think where it's going to be in another 100 years.
Mars.
Right? Well, that's it. I mean, that's, you know, you talk about, I wrote an article on the space exploration, AI and space exploration in Forbes a couple of weeks ago. It's there, right? It's just, it's going to happen. We need to look outside of where we are today. You know, just in the Milky Way galaxy, it's estimated based on the Kepler project in 2013 that are 40 billion planets that are in the Goldilocks zone, which is close enough to a star to be able to have life. And, you know, most people don't realize it, right? In terms of the number of galaxies in the universe, they're estimated to be 100 billion. So, and this is based on the, so Kepler and the Hubble telescope. So think about the opportunities for space. Absolutely, 100%. Peter's right on target.
Well, just Gary, just so you know, if you look on our website, the Weimer Group of companies, and we have the Weimer Family Office, Weimer Financial, our investment bank, our partner family office, and then our other business is Weimer Space. Per Weimer's a founding astronaut with Richard Branson on Virgin Galactic. So, you know, we're very interested in exploring space, just like in Star Trek, and we're also looking at exploring the environment back home. So we actually have, you know, the depths of the ocean is also very near and dear to us.
Well, if you're interested in AI, involved in any of those kind of projects, you know, companies are going up on the AI side. It could be unicorns. Let me know, because that's what we're doing too. I mean, I think we're in a unique time, a unique period right now, where we've got to look forward, and at the same time, we've got to, you know, we've got to be more efficient about what we're going to do, and we got to look beyond, you know, Earth.
Great. So we just have 7 more minutes to go. I just want to take one last different question about startups. So basically, it's a difficult time for every one of us, like all of us. But when it comes to startups, it's even more difficult, you know, and for the obvious reasons. So in terms of communication and marketing, what are the must-have for a successful fundraising from a founder perspective? Gary, you've got the most experience.
Yes. So you mean in terms of what? In terms of how to get out to the market, or in terms of how to fundraise?
Fundraise, yeah. What are the must-haves?
Well, I mean, must-haves. Actually, I'm doing a 2-hour VC task force later today on exactly that. So.
Wow. Okay.
So in Silicon Valley, but so I mean, it's pretty simple. It's like, you know, the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. What do you need? You need a great team. A team, you don't want to have any more than 3 founders. You want to have a marketing person, a technology person, and an operations person. That's what I suggest. Another thing is I talk about 3 pieces. Intergenerational. We have not focused on that. Most startups, you know, they're young, you know, they're under 25, they get the company started. But I say intergenerational because you need the experience as a Peter or Justin or Henry have, to be able to get the company launched forward. And we have not really done that in the past. So I believe that's important. I talk about multicultural because diversity breeds a lot of different opportunities, ideas. And so multicultural teams. And today, decentralized, regionally diverse teams. Because you want to take economies, right? If you got lower cost of labor in places like Russia or China or India, in terms of development, you want to use those. At the same time, you want to go where you have the best sales, marketing, and business development. So whether that's in London or the US or wherever. And then you want to have access to capital. So we say Silicon Valley because it's a port to the rest of the world. 50% of the money is still located there. And it doesn't matter if it's from Austria or Russia or China. I've raised money from Israel there, China, etc. It's just a place where you have it. So the companies, well, what I'm looking for is companies that are revenue producing, because I'm sure that they have product market fit. It's much more likely they've had the fit. I'm looking for companies that are dominating a particular region. So if they're in India or Singapore, they've dominated that space and they're ready to go global. Looking for companies that are open-minded. You know, they're not restricted by themselves, that they need to stay the CEO forever or of the company, that they're open to change, because you're going to change. There aren't a lot of Mark Zuckerbergs or Steve Jobs out there, right? Or Richard Bransons. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
Henry, you would like to take next? Did you just say something?
Sure, absolutely. So I think I'll probably use another angle to answer this question. I think, you know, how in the past, prior COVID, I think growth and burn in startups, extreme growth and burn, it's probably the name of the game. I think certainly the mentality have changed. I think there's more emphasis on capital efficiencies and runway. I think if you can, how do I say it? I think it's a balance of growth. Growth is important, because you don't see growth. Why want to invest in this damn thing? But at the same time, I think there's certainly more emphasis in capital efficiency and runway. Maybe in the past, you can burn, you burn 1 million in a year. Now I can probably burn 1 million in 18 months, right? If you can stress that, how can you use more capital efficiently? I think if you can demonstrate that along with some of the comments, I think that might be help to, for you to raise capital.
Excellent. Thank you, Henry. Peter?
Yeah, so again, I'm not a focused venture capital investor. So what I look at for in my investment, management. You can have a great idea, you can have a great execution strategy, but you need management. And in my dealings and the amount of capital that I'm putting to work, it's based on experience. So going back to Gary's point in terms of having experience, and not just experience in terms of successful experience. I always like the glacier analogy. You see the little tip of the iceberg at the top there, but the whole bottom part of the iceberg is filled with successes and failures and more failures and more failures. So that experience is of utmost importance. And then also in terms of being able to execute on that strategy takes a combination of experience and the ability to move it through. So again, it's all about the management team. And also in the, not the post-COVID world, but in general, if you're looking at where I'm sitting now, 20 years from now, all the millennials will be my age. And thus, ESG compliance, which is a sexy word now, should just be part of every investor's tool set. It basically, environment, sustainable environment, social responsibility, corporate governance, all those things should be part of any investor's tool shed, particularly if you're a credit analyst, in terms of making sure that they're environmentally friendly. They're not going to be focused on huge liabilities that might come out from what they're doing. The governance is there, and also taking into account the impact on the climate.
Absolutely, very vital points. And management, sustainability, and governance. Well, thank you so much, Peter. Justin, would like to take your thoughts on that as well. Pick your brain.
Yeah, no, I hard to argue. Those are all good points. I mean, I think that someone who is much smarter than me put it pretty succinctly and said, that brilliant ideas are just that. There's they're a dime a dozen, but execution is everything, which I think kind of covers everyone saying it, right? That you really need a great team to execute. I personally believe in Gary's kind of three musketeers model, especially as every business becomes a technology business. You really need somebody, and this depends on the product or service that's being offered. If it's CPG or it's something that's, more consumer, then maybe not as much. But if it's something that really, if it's really frontier and it's very tech driven, you really need a CTO that is right there at the edge with you. You can't outsource that, and that's a really big red flag. And you need somebody who's operationally focused right there with them to help kind of keep the team together. And if you have a CEO with, to Peter's point, with like kind of a couple layers of experience, like pushing that iceberg up, some years in the tank, because ultimately it's it's more about the people will tell, like there's these like kind of great stories about Howard Schultz from Starbucks, who's I know, like we're like kind of US centric, I know Peter's in the UK, but like you kind of US centric here. But like Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, and somebody said like, "Oh, how did you know when you made it?" And he kind of he looked like taken aback, and he goes, we have to earn it every day. We didn't, and this is after Starbucks has just been crushing it for years. And I think that's a really good example of a leader who, just gets it and understands that, kind of where the paradigm is in leadership, and understands that as a business, you kind of have to live and die every day. And it's iterative. It's an iterative process, and it really can't rest on your laurels. And that takes time to grow. And you might not get that out of the box. And so, and there's a lot of struggling early on. It's easy to look at Starbucks up on the hill and everybody's drinking the coffee, but it didn't start out that way for anybody, for people who aren't as familiar at home. So, I very much like, it takes a team. And it takes a team. You can have a good idea and all the rest, but it really does. It takes a team. And as far as like now COVID, I'm with Gary. I think focus on the basics, really minimum product, great execution, and then staying strong, good communication, and just like be the best at the lowest burn and get it out there, really good product market fit, and the rest like will take care of itself.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you. Thank you all. That obviously has brought us to the end of the session of this VCTV family that I call now. Any closing remarks from each of you before we close this session? Gary.
Yeah, sure. Stay positive. The glass is half full and not half empty. And that's, big part of all the companies I've done is looking at it from a positive perspective. Focus on revenue, stay happy, enjoy your life. And this will be done, be able to enjoy your life and go back to some type of normalcy again, but enjoy it, be happy.
Absolutely. Thank you. Love those points. Peter.
Yeah, I would just say, I have 6 kids. 3 are just entering the workforce, but there is no workforce for them to enter. And I try to tell them to put things into perspective. You can sit at home now. You can be on Zoom chats. You can watch Netflix. There's a phone. There's an internet. Enjoy the time with your family. Spend more quality time with everybody. Reach out to friends. Reach out to prospective employers. You're in a lot better situation than the person that was born in the early 1900s. Then when they got to be 18, had to deal with World War I. Then shortly thereafter, they came home to the Great Depression, which was followed not too long thereafter by World War II, which was then followed by Korean War, the Vietnam War, the 1970s horrible economic situation. They're living pretty much in the times of peace and prosperity. We'll get through this pandemic, and hopefully everybody will be a lot stronger for it. And as Justin mentioned and Gary's mentioned, the importance of being together with family and using this quality time to be with each other. I think we'll end up being more empathetic to each other coming out of this crisis, or I hope we will be.
Absolutely. No doubts about it. Thank you, Peter. Henry?
Sure. So I think 2 months ago, when Warren Buffett had his annual shareholder meeting, he said one quote: "Never bet against America." I would just even expand to it: never bet against the world. I think we have seen, we as human race, we have always overcome obstacles, no matter how hard, how difficult, how easy it was. Yes, it's always difficult when you're at the moment of difficulties, challenging times. But this will be over. But I look at it, I'm more like I'm just optimistic in general. I'm half full kind of guy instead of half empty. I think, looking at this, there's going to be some positive or quite a few positive along the way. Digital transformation, it's, speeding up digital transformation is definitely one of them. When we look back 5-10 years from now, we're going to see this, wow, holy cow, this is a tremendous catalyst for that. I think it's a great opportunity to spend more time with your family. When we look back 5-10 years from now, we probably then, when things get busy, get back to normal, we would probably miss that. So, take the positives out of a negative experience and let's embrace it. At the end of the day, we human as a race, we have overcome obstacles, difficulty, challenging times. This is just another one in my view. So
absolutely, take the positives out of the negatives. Thank you, Henry. Last but not least, Justin, your closing remarks, please.
Oh yeah, no, I just hard. I think everybody covered it. There have been challenging times before. There will after this. It's I think that if nothing else, I think it's been easy. Globalization has flattened the world in a lot of ways. And so I think it was easy for a long time to take things for granted. And, if you could call this perhaps one of the great awakenings, think of that as you may, whether it's social issues, whether it's new technologies, whether it's kind of new supply chains, new ways of thinking. But it's definitely an interesting time to be alive. And so it's one of those things where you kind of have to stop and appreciate it for what it is, because anytime there's stress and chaos, there's always opportunities. And so you just gotta appreciate it for what it is.
Great. Thank you for being a part of this VCTV family since we started. And I always love to host and speak to you, my fellow speakers. So tomorrow I'm moderating another session where a great startup in healthcare space with a blockchain, underlying technology using blockchain, are going to be speaking. So I would really request, I think Henry is one of the judges, speakers as well for tomorrow. I would request other speakers to tune in, and I'm going to share everything on my social media. And I look forward to speak to you again. Thank you. Good night. Stay safe, stay healthy.